Hi folks, coming to you from bushland directly across the road from my home in Australia, and I want to share with you something very precious to me, how to hear the beautiful voice of Jesus. Did you know that he spent one whole chapter on how to hear his voice in the Gospel of John, chapter 10? Let's go there right now. It's amazing what he says there about what it sounds like. Where does he speak to us? To our ear? Okay, let's get into it. John chapter 10 and verse 1. Very truly I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in some other way, he's a thief and a robber. Okay, Jesus is setting up the story for us. The sheep, that's us. The devil, well, he's the thief, and Jesus is the shepherd. And he's going to tell us now in the next few verses that the thief will talk to the sheep, that the shepherd will talk to the sheep, and that the sheep know the difference between the voice of the devil and the voice of the shepherd. And what he tells us about what the voice of the shepherd sounds like and what he will talk to us about will blow your mind. This passage is very dear to me. One of the first passages I learned when I was 17 years old, and it's never left me. Okay? So verse 2. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. So the thief will come in over the gate. The shepherd will come in through the gate. Both of them are wanting to talk to the sheep. Okay? And now listen to what he says about the voice of the shepherd, the voice of the thief, and how the sheep understand the difference between the two voices. Verse 3, the gatekeeper opens the gate for the shepherd, and the sheep listen to his voice. The sheep listen to his voice. We are supposed to listen and hear the voice of Jesus. We are all sheep of Jesus. We are all supposed to hear his voice. The problem is we've never been taught how. And I really hope this blesses you now. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. Okay, let's stop. This is really important. The shepherd talks to the sheep. They hear his voice. They listen to his voice. They recognize his voice. Look how clearly we are supposed to hear the voice of Jesus. The sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name. In the Middle East, shepherd and the sheep, out in nature, out in the hills, he wouldn't speak to them in Aramaic. A shepherd speaks to his sheep by making a noise. The word there translated into English voice is the Greek word phone. It means sound. It means sound. So don't think you're going to be hearing voices in your head, human voices. Jesus will communicate with you clearly, yeah? And his voice will be a particular sound. He calls his own sheep by name. So there's the shepherd, he's up in the hills. He's with his 100 sheep. And he calls each one by name. Jesus speaks to you individually and personally. He knows your name. When a shepherd would speak to his 100 sheep, he would speak to each one individually. He calls out his own sheep by name. And he wouldn't say, John, Tom, Terry. He would make guttural noises, and the sheep would recognize the sound of the voice. And when the shepherd would make a particular sound, one particular sheep would recognize that sound. The shepherd's calling me. When Jesus speaks to you, he will call you by name. It'll be individual. It will be private. Okay? So Jesus will speak to you differently than what he speaks to me. He calls his own sheep by name, individually, one by one. Jesus wants you to have a private, personal relationship with you. He will talk to you differently than what he talks to me. But when you hear his voice and he'll call you by name, isn't this beautiful? You'll recognize it. And the other sheep don't respond because they won't hear him. Because that noise that Jesus makes to that one particular sheep will only be recognized by that one sheep. He calls his own sheep by name. Personally, individually, privately, intimately, and you will recognize the voice of the shepherd. He calls out his own sheep by name and he leads them out. So what's the purpose of hearing the voice of Jesus? He's going to tell you to follow him. He's going to lead you out. He's going to give you directions. Wow. You'll hear his name personally, privately. And when you hear him, there'll be instructions and he'll lead you out. Go this way. It will be that specific. What does it sound like? We'll get there. Verse 4, he calls his own sheep by name, personal, private, intimate, one-on-one, and he leads them out. He'll give you instructions that you'll know what to do, and you're supposed to. Here it is. Verse 4, when he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them. So he'll speak to everyone one-on-one. You, and the voice of the shepherd to the sheep, one by one, and then he goes ahead of them and he leads them all corporately. And his sheep follow him because they know his voice. We are supposed to recognize the voice so clearly, so distinctly, so personally, so intimately that we'll follow him. What a beautiful passage, folks. They will follow him because they know his voice. The word there is phone. They know his sound. When Jesus speaks to you, we're supposed to recognize his voice. It will be personal and private, and it will be very specific. Go this way. And we'll follow. Why? Because we know his voice. But, verse 5, they will never follow a stranger, the thief. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Stop there. We are going to hear more than one voice in our heart and mind. We are going to hear the sound of the voice of the shepherd, and we're going to hear the sound of the voice of the false shepherd, the thief. So now we've got two sets of voices in our minds. And Jesus says we will recognize his voice so much that when the devil talks to us, or we condemn ourselves with our own voices in our own heads and our own judgments about ourselves, we're going to be able to tell the difference between our own voices in our own heads, our own thoughts, the devil's voice in our head, and the voice of Jesus. They will never follow a stranger. In other words, the devil's going to talk to you and he's going to give you directions. But we will not follow. Why? They will never follow a stranger. Why? In fact, they will run away. Why? Because they do not recognize the stranger's voice. They hear it. They hear the directions from the devil or from our own self-condemnation, but we won't go that way. It doesn't sound like Jesus. They do not recognize it, We're supposed to hear the voice of Jesus so clearly that we can tell it apart from the devil and our own minds. And we'll never follow it. So this has got a bit of a problem for us now, because now we've got our own voice in our own head that condemn us. We've got the devil's voice. We've got Jesus' voice. How do we tell the difference? By getting to know the shepherd and spending time with him. By hanging around the shepherd up in the hills all the time, listening to his voice. We know what it sounds like. We need to spend time with Jesus to familiarize ourselves with his voice. Otherwise, the thief is going to talk to us. We're going to talk to us. Yeah? Verse 14, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. And verse 27, my sheep listen to my voice, and I know them, and they know me. Just stop right there. What's the whole purpose of hearing the voice of Jesus? What's the primary goal of hearing the voice of Jesus? I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep. My sheep know me. My sheep listen to my voice, and I know them, and they know me. The purpose of listening to the voice of Jesus, this is the content: to know him. Not to know about him, and not just to get instructions from him so we follow him, but to know him. To know means intimate relationship. When you hear the voice of Jesus, it'll be one-on-one, heart-to-heart stuff. It won't be just saying, do this, do that, do that. There is direction as well. But the whole bottom line of hearing the voice of Jesus is to know him. And to know him is to love him. It's to enter into a personal, intimate, heart-to-heart relationship with Jesus. And this is what I've had with Jesus for 45 years. And I want this to be your experience as well, if it's not already. When we hear the voice of Jesus, he wants to get to know you. He wants you to get to know him. The main point of hearing the voice of Jesus is to have an intimate, personal, individual, heart-to-heart relationship with him. And from that will come instructions. Do this, do that. My sheep listen to my voice, verse 27. I know them, and they follow me. We hear the voice of Jesus, we know him, and as a result, we follow him. He gives us directions. And verse 28, I give them eternal life. My sheep listen to my voice. Verse 27, I know them and they follow me, and I give them eternal life. Eternal life is to know Jesus. Eternal life is not about a life that goes on and on and on, which it does, but it's about hearing the voice of Jesus and being in a relationship with him. And this is exactly what he says in John 17:3. And this is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. Eternal life is a quality of life. It's knowing God, knowing Jesus, and knowing God through Jesus. That's the life that matters. It's the life of a relationship with God. So what's the voice of Jesus about? Entering into a personal relationship with him. He knows you by name. It's individual, it's private. It'll be special just between you and him. And he says here, enter into relationship with me and know me and follow me. I'll give you directions. What does the voice of Jesus actually sound like? That'll be on the next one. And I'll try to make that today for you as well. God bless you.